Everyone to stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight's invocation is being offered by Council Member Walter Hunt.
Thank you. Let's pray. God our Father, we come to Thee because You have helped us as a people in the past and led us with a wonderful wisdom. You have stretched out Thy hand and have brought us great deliverance. Thou hast made in our city a home for the oppressed of the earth. We trust and we still believe You have a great purpose to accomplish on behalf of this great city. We cannot question that Thou have our welfare at heart, and though there may be agitation all around us, we trust in You. We commit the interests of this city to Your loving care, and grant, O Lord, that there may be no bad spirit manifested in our decisions, and that when the agitation shall cease, we may see the blessings and acknowledge them with gratitude. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Without objection, we'll suspend the calling of the roll and record the names of the members present throughout the meeting. Is there a motion for the adoption of our minutes of our meeting on June 21st? Second, without objection, the minutes will stand approved as written. Madam Clerk, are there any messages from the mayor?
No, ma'am, there are not.
Yes, Ms. Langster, Councilmember Langster.
If I could have a second of personal privilege, would everyone join in welcoming, seeing the smiling face of our legal counsel, Mr. Jan Cooper, is back.
We've missed you.
Thank you. I missed you.
Okay. On your desk, you will find a letter announcing the Health and Education Facilities Board vacancy. At our next meeting on July the 19th, we will call for nominations to fill this vacancy. And then we'll have the election on August the 2nd. We are now at the point on our agenda for elections and confirmations. Councilmember Adkins.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. The Rules and Confirmations Committee met and considered the following appointments. The first was the Metropolitan Clerk, the appointment of Miss Anna Escobar. The committee approved 4 for, none against, and I move her approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Councilman.
Next is the Action Commission, the reappointment of Miss Karen Dottie, the appointment of Brenda Dowdle, and the appointment of Sarah Longini, and I move approval of all 3 for the Action Commission. And the committee approved 6 for, none against.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Councilman.
Next is the Agriculture Extension Board, the reappointment of Steve Butler, the appointment of Mona Crabtree, the appointment of Dr. Thelma Sanders Hunter. The committee approved 7 for, none against for all candidates, and I move their approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Next is the Airport Authority, the reappointment of Mr. Jack Bovender. The committee approved 7 for, none against, and I move his approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Councilman Adkins.
Next is the Charter Revision Commission, the appointment of Ms. Lorinda McLaughlin. The committee approved 7 for, none against, and I move her approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no.
Next is the Community Corrections Advisory Board, the reappointment of Mr. Vince Wyatt and the appointment of Ms. Tyler Yarbrough. The committee approved 7 for, none against, and I move their approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Councilman.
Next is the Electrical Examiners and Appeals Board, the appointment of Mr. Mike Thomas. The committee approved 7 for, 0 against, and I move his approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Councilman Adkins.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Next was the Board of Equalization, the appointment of Ms. Connie Harden. The appointment was deferred, 7-4, none against, and I move deferral.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor of deferral, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Next was the Fire and Building Code Appeals Board, the reappointment of Mr. Michael Bearden. The committee deferred, 7-4, none against, I move deferral.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor of deferral, please say aye. Opposed, no. Deferral passes. Councilman.
Next was the Historic Zoning Commission. First was the appointment of Mr. Richard Fletcher, and he was deferred, 7-4, none against, and I move his deferral.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor of the deferral, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Next was also the Historic Zoning Commission, the appointment of Mr. Hunter Gee. The committee approved, 7-4, none against, and I move his approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Next is the Nashville Education Community and Arts TV Corporation, the appointment of Ms. Jan Davidson and also the appointment of Mr. David Wicker. The committee approved both candidates, 7-4, none against, and I move both approvals.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Councilman.
Next, on the Plumbing Examiners and Appeals Board, Mr. Curtis. He was approved, 7-4, none against, and I move his approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Next was the reappointment of Edward Galbraith. He was withdrawn. The committee approved the withdrawal motion, 7-4, none against, and I move for, I guess I don't need to move a withdrawal. He was withdrawn. Next was the appointment of Mr. Ron Holdaway. The committee approved, 7-4, none against, and I move his approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Next was the Sexually Oriented Business Licensing Board, the appointment of Mr. Warwick Robinson. The committee approved, 7-4, none against, and I move his approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Next was the Social Services Commission, the appointment of Marlene Santa Pers, and the committee approved her, 7-4, none against, and I move her approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Also on the Social Services Commission, Lolita Tony was withdrawn, 7-4, none against on the withdrawal.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor of withdrawal, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Next was my favorite, Traffic and Parking Commission, the appointment of Stephen Turner, and the committee approved, 8-4, none against, and I move the approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Next was the Vegetation Control Board, the reappointment of Mr. Hollis Malone, and also the appointment of Stephen Zralik, and the committee approved, 9-4, none against, and I move their approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Next is the Wastewater Hearing Authority, the reappointment of Miss Ruthie Brown Cherry, the reappointment of Miss Terry Kelvin, and also the reappointment of Dr. Robert Wingfield were deferred, 10-4, none against. I move their deferral.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Deferral passes.
Also on the Wastewater Hearing Authority was the reappointment of Dr. Edward Thaxton, and the committee approved, 10-4, none against, and I move his approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. That concluded our business.
Thank you. When I call your name, please stand. Anna Escobar. I would just like to say congratulations on being the new Metropolitan Clerk. When I call your name, please stand and remain standing. Karen Dottie, Brenda Dwaddle, Sarah Longheim, Steve Butler, Mona Crabtree, Thelma Sanders Hunter, Jack Bovender, Lorinda McLaughlin, Vince Wyatt, Tyler Yarbrough, Mike Thomas, Hunter Gee, David Wicker, Jan Davidson, W.A. Curtis, Ron Holdaway, Warwick Robinson, Marlene Perez, Stephen Turner, Hollis Malone, Stephen Zerlich, and Edward Thaxton. On behalf of the Metro Council, I want to thank you for your willingness to serve our city and to give us your time and energy. Thank you. We are now at bills on public hearing. The first one is BL 10674, amends 107.87 acres of the existing Green Hills Urban Design Overlay District to modify variations to the conventional standards of the underlying base zoning located along Hillsborough Pike, Hillsborough Drive, Hillsborough Circle, Hobbs Road, Warfield Drive, Richard Jones Road, Bandywood Drive, and Abbott Martin Road. Councilmember McGuire.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'd move to withdraw.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor of withdrawal, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion to withdraw passes. BL 2011-920 makes applicable the provisions of the Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District to 51.93 acres of property along 43rd Avenue North, 44th Avenue North, 47th Avenue North, 48th Avenue North, 50th Avenue North, 51st Avenue North, Charlotte Avenue, Elkins Avenue, Park Avenue, and Sylvan Glen Court. Councilmember Holloman.
I move to open the public hearing, but I would like to make a brief comment before I do, if you don't mind, Vice Mayor. There is a substitute ordinance for this that I do plan to move at the conclusion of the public hearing.
I'd like to see a show of hands of those in support. Thank you. A show of hands of those in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak? Please come to the lectern and state your name and address.
I'm Wendell Goodman, and I live with my wife at 4901 Park Avenue, which is across the street from Richland Park. Our brick Victorian house was built in 1900. We bought the house 8 years ago and invested a lot of money and time to renovate it so that it maintains its rich character and historical significance. I am also president of the Historic Sylvan Park Incorporated, an association of homeowners that are dedicated to the preservation of Sylvan Park as an historical residential neighborhood. We have sponsored this effort for the overlay and requested Councilman Holloman to seek it for the 170 homes on Park and Elkins. Our membership owns 9 homes on Park and Elkins. We are also working with the Tennessee Historical Commission on the application to get this same area on the National Historic Register. Without including the condominium complexes and the houses of Sylvan Glen, the middle age of individual homes on Park and Elkins Avenue is 91 years. The oldest house still standing was built in 1889, making the house 122 years old. I am asking you to vote in favor of this zoning change. The historical preservation of Elkins and Park Avenue will be a tremendous asset to the homeowners, to Sylvan Park, and to all of Nashville. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Holloman.
Vice Mayor, at this time I'd like to move the substitute.
Have a motion and a second on the substitute. All in favor of the substitute, please. Councilman Jameson, do you wish to speak on the substitute? All in favor of the substitute, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Substitute passes. Councilman Holloman.
I'd like to move the bill as substituted.
Have a motion and a second. Councilman Jameson.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I rise in support of this measure. East Nashville has been an extreme beneficiary of similar zoning overlays, and I rise mostly just to commend Councilman Holloman on a thorough process. I think we all know on this floor how contentious these issues can be, and it's a genuine pleasure to see a bill come up that has literally no opposition, which may not be the case for other bills coming up tonight, but do want to commend Councilman Holloman on his efforts, and with that, express my support. Thank you.
All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. 920 passes. Next is BL 2011-922, amends the Metro Zoning Code pertaining to the designation of landmark signs. Councilmember Holloman.
Move to open the public hearing.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing none on either side, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Holloman.
Move for approval with a brief explanation.
Have a motion and a second. Councilman?
I just want to take 1 second to explain to this body a little bit about this ordinance, and it's co-sponsored by Councilman Claiborne, and I appreciate his help on this bill. I'm excited about this bill because it provides us a way to incentivize retaining some of our great old signage throughout the city, primarily by not having it count against allowable sign face limitations. And hopefully with this, we'll be able to preserve and keep many of our old historic signs that are landmarks to our businesses throughout the city in the years to come. So with that, I move approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Next is BL 2011-923, amends the Metro Zoning Code to amend the definition of cottage development, single family, and the standards for single family cottage developments. Councilmember Call.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I'd move to open the public hearing.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Call.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. We'll move approval with a brief explanation.
Have a motion and a second. Councilman?
This is kind of a housekeeping bill that goes along with another piece of legislation that will be back in front of us for third reading next meeting. Councilman Toller and I plan to unveil or get to you all an amendment regarding that legislation here shortly, and to schedule a meeting of the Planning and Zoning Committee to discuss it. So that will be coming forthright. Thank you.
All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-924 amends the Metro Zoning Code to modify the standards applicable to home occupation and create a new land use for standards called home business. Councilman Jameson.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Move to open the public hearing.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Does anyone in support wish to speak? If you do, please line up at the lectern.
Madam Vice Mayor, council members at large, district council members, and guests. I am representing selected friends today. I'm not here as a paid position. I'm representing friends who are in the legal, marketing, graphics, and
Could you please state your name and your address?
I'm sorry. Deborah Varallo. I'm at 1537 Stokely Lane in Oat Hickory.
Thank you.
Thank you. Many people choose for various reasons to work out of their home. It might be because they can work and they don't have to worry about traveling so far. It may be because they want to be next to their children so that they can continue to work, or it may be that they want to save money. Technology now allows a small business owner to run a very productive firm from his or her home. Technology eliminates the constant business visits. Even as I speak, I see that many of you are either tweeting or you're texting or you're sending out emails to different people. So we don't have to communicate with people directly anymore. We get to do it technology-wise. Before I was born, business visits were allowed at people's homes. My family's doctor visited my mother numerous times. For those that know my family, it was 13 plus pregnancies in which the doctor came by. He didn't disturb anyone. And up until 1988, patrons and clients were allowed on-site at a person's home. It wasn't until 1998 when the zoning code was rewritten. That was when clients and patrons were prohibited from venturing to a person's residence. Since then, every one of my friends who have asked me to speak tonight are illegal in their business. When the zoning code was changed in 1998, there were no individual attention given to the issue, and the community did not really have a say. But now we all have a say as to what goes on. So I decided I wanted to find out what was this all about. I went to one of the community meetings. I listened to what the council people had to say. I listened to what the community had to say on both sides. I am in support of this bill. I want people to be legal when they have their businesses at their home. I want them to be able to start businesses. They'll probably compete against me, and that's okay. That's good for the economy. The new home ordinance bill allows on-site clients, yet limits the number of clients in a day. It allows entrepreneurs to be fiscally responsible and build their business, yet it protects the residential integrity of a neighborhood by providing clear standards for home businesses. And it allows small entrepreneurial business owners who want to make a living and support a family, yet the bill still has safeguards into the new Metro zoning codes. I would love to have a few home businesses in my neighborhood in Old Hickory, Tennessee. I'm sure I probably do have some that haven't spoken out. And the nice thing about having them there is that they are the eyes of the community, because most of the burglaries happen during the day when the rest of us are in our office building working. I support the home business ordinance. Thank you.
My name is Sandra Walker. I live at 2120 Lebanon Pike. I don't have a home business, but I am in support of it. Ms. Morello said just about everything that needed to be said, but I just think it's the right thing to do in this economy. I think it's a way that the economy needs to go to create more businesses. We need whatever we can do to have more jobs for people, and that's one way that that could happen. I just don't see how you cannot allow people to do that when it would allow them to support themselves and their families honestly, in trying, instead of being supported maybe by somebody else like the government. I just think, and the other thing is that you want it to be legal, and that's something that we seem to be trying to overstep, I think. And so I'm in support of it, and I hope that y'all consider that. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Colleen O'Connell. I live at 3000 Windermere Circle in the Donaldson area. And what I've learned from this procedure is that there are already 12,000 people in Nashville area making a living out of their homes. The crime rate hasn't gone up. Their neighbors aren't complaining. The properties haven't been devalued. They're doing good things. And I don't want to see them called code breakers. I don't want them to be labeled as violators of any kind of code. There's no purpose to that. I would support this bill at any time, but it is especially vital right now in the worst economy since the Great Depression. With unemployment at 9%, why would we want to handicap anyone who has the initiative to figure out how to make a living without renting office space? If someone can run a business out of her home, why would we harness her with unnecessary office space costs? If someone figures out how to contribute to the tax base in this city from his spare room, why would we throw roadblocks up in front of him? Do we really want to tell a guy with a guitar that he has to meet his songwriting partners at an office park? This is Nashville, home to thousands of people who march to the beat of a different drummer. They've created the image of Nashville. They are responsible for its reputation. They have made it a unique city. We owe their uniqueness to their efforts. Let's be a fine city and encourage the independent, creative, adventuresome, and entrepreneurial spirit of our citizens. Please approve this bill. Thank you.
My name is Carol Norton. I live at 801 Boscobel Street in East Nashville. I'm in favor of the ordinance, although I do not operate a business from my home. I see the new ordinance as a housekeeping measure to clarify what is allowed. The list is certainly much longer than it used to be. It allows signage, and before it wasn't allowed at all. It also provides limits on the space allocated to the business, assuring that the residential character of our neighborhoods is maintained and a home business does not become a spot zone commercial enterprise. This ordinance will ensure that any business is legal and licensed to operate as a business in metropolitan Nashville-Davidson County. The same type of business operating in a bricks and mortar location has to comply with zoning requirements, permits, business licenses, and taxes. This ordinance will level the playing field in making sure that home businesses do the same while still having the convenience of not having to leave home to do it. To those that say there is no clear-cut enforcement included in the ordinance, I offer this example. In 1978, we didn't have enforcement with historic zoning either. My neighborhood was the first to have local historic zoning. There was no link to codes for historic zoning. There was no legal recourse if someone did not comply. Eventually, we did, and we do have both, through codes and environmental court. This ordinance is a first step to move home occupation business forward, and I urge you to approve it. Thank you.
My name is Keith Newcomb. I live at 604 Georgetown Drive in the Hillwood neighborhood of West Nashville. And I support this home occupation and home business ordinance, and I hope that you will too. I've, like many of you, probably heard about concerns that people might have about businesses, quote unquote, operating on their street. And I think that paragraph 12 of the ordinance, which says that the activity of the person who works in their home has to be imperceptible by any neighbor at all times, takes care of all of those concerns. The second concern that I've heard is that enforcement might be a problem. Well, just like the codes department operates a little differently than, say, the police department when it comes to enforcement. They operate on a call for service model, much like the fire department. If there's a problem, you call the fire department, they come out and put out the fire. But they don't have resources dedicated to patrolmen looking for smoke plumes across Nashville. Just doesn't make sense. Same with the codes department. So a call for service model is an appropriate mechanism for enforcement on this. And that concludes my remarks. I think that the prior speakers have been eloquent. And I guess one PS I would add, I've never seen a councilman, maybe many of you have, but I want to compliment Mike Jamison on his efforts to consult and incorporate the concerns from everyone and anybody who's had something they've wanted to say about this ordinance. I think most every one of the comments that have been brought to his attention in terms of concerns from both supporters and opponents is reflected in the ordinance. So as a constituent of all of you, I commend Councilman Jamison's example. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you. Would those in opposition wishing to speak please line up at the lectern?
Vice Mayor, members of the Metro Council, I'm J.B. Loring. I live at 3231 Knobview Drive, Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm opposed to this bill. For one thing, just this morning in the paper it told about all the commercial buildings that are vacant. If we open this up to moving businesses in the neighborhood, we're going to have 5 times the vacancies that we have now. And then talking about enforcement, that it's very difficult to enforce. Well, on that theory, we probably should let stop signs and speeding 50 or 60 miles an hour be legal, because it's hard to enforce all of those. So that's not a very good synopsis of comparison, but still it makes about as much sense as trying to use the enforcement theory now. I moved into a neighborhood, a residential neighborhood, because I don't want businesses on each side of me. And I think there's plenty of room for the businesses to be located in commercial areas. The sound business practice should dominate the fact that keep commercial businesses in commercial areas, let residential people live in the residential areas. The heartbreaking theory of this is waking up and having a shop next door to your house, and all good intentions. And I know Councilman Jamison, he's got a litany of of reasons why we should do this, and everything is going to be restricted to one car and one person and one barber chair or one beauty shop chair. But you and I know that will not hold true. Somebody will be at a barber shop or beauty shop, one person will be early, one person will forget their appointment, one person will be late. Pretty soon you got 4 or 5 cars backed up in the neighborhood. And I'm just so opposed to businesses moving in the neighborhood when there's so many commercial establishments that are vacant now, and they need these people. And I've heard, well, we can't afford it because the rent's so high. Well, I believe with all these vacancies, you can sure bargain on rent right now. And I see my time's just about up. I appreciate it. Appreciate your listening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Sandra Carlton. I live on Mockingbird Road here in Nashville. Some of us have spent many hours with Mr. Jameson and Ms. Region over the past weeks, and I appreciate their willingness to try to compromise our differences. I was and am receptive to modifying the standards applicable to our present home occupation, but I remain opposed to creating a new land use and opening our neighborhoods to home businesses, where customers come to business owners' homes in Nashville's neighborhoods. Perhaps not legally, but in practical effect, home businesses will create mixed-use neighborhoods across our entire county. Use a 500-home neighborhood as an example. If 1/4 or 125 homes opened home businesses, there could be up to 2,500 trips per day into that neighborhood, 1,250 cars with 2 trips each, 1 in and 1 out. That is just too much traffic and parking on neighborhood streets, which typically are not wide enough to accommodate commercial traffic. Many do not have sidewalks. And it certainly is not safe where, in our efforts to walk 100 miles from Mayor Dean, we breathe the auto emissions and dodge the vehicles visiting those home businesses, not to speak of the children who dart from behind parked cars to chase a ball or visit a neighboring family. It simply makes no sense that for every 1 driver who stays home to receive customers each day, we bring 10 vehicles into our neighborhoods. It was suggested that this vehicular traffic could help with neighborhood crime. I don't know about where you live, but most of my neighbors who are at home during the day work. They don't spend much time sitting on the porch or peering out the windows. And even if they did, the influx of so many strange vehicles would make it impossible to identify which ones are being driven by folks looking for a home or car to break into. They would just blend in with the rest of the traffic. While this might be a wonderful idea in Mr. Jameson's district, forcing one-size-fits-all zoning into every neighborhood in this county is painting with too broad a brush. Every neighborhood is not a good candidate for commercial creep, and this is much too important an issue to push through at the end of a council term. Mr. Cobb's Codes Office keeps track of complaints about home occupations, and he stated they had very few. I don't believe that would be the case if we allow home businesses. And I also don't believe his office has the manpower to enforce such an expansion, even if neighbors are forced to track offenses, turning neighbor against neighbor. That is not what Nashville needs. I would appreciate your vote against including home businesses and for Nashville's neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Bill Bruce, and I live at 4325 Wallace Lane. I have lived there for 35 years and raised my family there. I've practiced law in this county for 38 years. I've represented a lot of people who have emotional, mental problems that need counseling. If we pass this bill, you will allow people to set up counseling offices, and all types of people will come into the neighborhood. People may have anger management, they may have alcohol problems, they may be sex offenders. There's about 100 young lawyers now that can't afford to have an office. That's true, but what they could do, there's alternatives. They could set up a virtual office. They could, for a few $100s, they could have a receptionist take their phone calls and use conference rooms to consult with clients. In my neighborhood, there was a tragedy that happened years ago when Marsha Trimble was killed. If you've read Season of Darkness or know anything about the case, it's speculated that the probation officer or parole officer sent Jerome Barrett to work at Geddes Douglas, which was on the corner of Estes and Hobbs Road. They think that's why he was in the neighborhood the day he saw the girl. Do you want a sex offender coming into your neighborhood and seeing a young girl, which exposes her to him? Do you want to, you know, I live in a residential neighborhood. I want to live in a residential neighborhood. I don't want to live in a neighborhood where their business is. For those reasons, I'm opposed to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Charlotte Cooper. I live at 3409 Trimble Road, and I'm a member of the Castleman Hobbs Neighborhood Association. I am strongly opposed to allowing customers or clients to visit home businesses in residential neighborhoods. When my husband and I were purchasing our home, which is our largest financial investment, we were looking for a strictly residential neighborhood, not a mixed-use neighborhood. This bill will basically change every residential neighborhood into a mixed-use neighborhood when businesses are allowed to have customers and clients visit the home business. I understand the advantage for home businesses, but I also feel those home business owners who want their customers and clients to be allowed to visit are in fact showing disrespect for their neighbors and their residential neighborhood. In my neighborhood, based on the census data, there are 32 home businesses. If this bill passes and they are allowed up to 10 customers a day, that could bring 1,600 cars in and out of my neighborhood each week. I keep hearing the argument that most cities allow home businesses to have customers and clients. That reminds me of when I was young and wanted to do something, and my parents asked me, just as I bet your parents ask you, if everyone was jumping off a cliff, would you jump off also? It doesn't make it right that just because other cities are doing it, Nashville should do it also. Nashville has beautiful residential neighborhoods throughout the city. Nashville also has mixed-use zone districts that are intended for residential and commercial. So please, send a message. Nashville wants to keep our residential neighborhoods residential. Please vote no. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lois Bruce, and I live at 4325 Wallace Lane. And Bill Bruce is my husband. He's already spoken, so I'll reiterate, just agree with what he has said. I am opposed to the bill that would allow customers to transact business in neighborhoods. The excess traffic and compromised safety of your constituents at their own homes are enough for you to oppose this proposal. Thank you.
I'm Susan Floyd of Bonnebrook Drive in Hermitage, and I would like to thank Councilman Jameson and Jennifer Region for their countless hours of hard work on this bill to make it as neighborhood friendly as possible. They did their due diligence, and I'm proud of you. I don't know if the Donaldson-Hermitage community is quite ready for this comprehensive home business bill yet. Our neighborhoods across the city are so very different. Recently, the Donaldson-Hermitage Neighborhood Association held a community meeting regarding this issue. After it was over, feelings were mixed. Some were strongly opposed, but some felt a little more at ease with this new bill. The sticking point seemed to be clients and customers visiting the business. I feel those who follow the law now would continue to do so, but I also feel those who abuse the law would continue in that same pattern. Perhaps we need to determine exactly how many businesses are out of compliance before we possibly create a bigger problem than we have now. There's a reason that Metro has laws restricting how many garage sales you can have in a neighborhood or how many consignment sales you can have. There's a reason citizens oppose LED signs in neighborhoods, that they oppose commercial buildings being built near their neighborhoods, and they are somewhat opposed to new developments that route more traffic through their neighborhoods. When and if we introduce the home business bill, should we take baby steps and not this giant leap? Our homes and our neighborhoods are our safe place, safe from the stress and atmosphere of commercialism. When you tonight make your decision, make it carefully. We don't need to add another reason for citizens of Nashville to pack up their belongings and move to another county. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mina Johnson. I live at 6600 Fox Hollow Road. I wish there was a section not oppose or not support. I'm in between. I'm so torn. And I really want to thank Mike Jameson and the planning staff, Jennifer Reagan. They spend lots of time listening to our concern and try to make this bill really neighborhood friendly. And I think at the end, it did come up with really comprehensive bill, but I am not sure if this bill is ready to be adopted. My biggest concern is added traffic into the neighborhood. And I am 100% support home occupation part. For that reason, I have large concern on home business portion. Maybe some business is okay, not producing not so many traffic into residential area. But some business such business have to have direct contact, physical contact with customer, has potential more traffic producing into residential area. So maybe what I'm suggesting is just think about it. At the end, I know you have to vote yes or no, and you may have to choose tough choice. But there might be some amendment, or just think about, is it okay to open up entire neighborhood for business friendly? I don't know what is the right choice or right amendment, so I will leave up to you to make this bill better. Thank you.
My name is Patsy Bruce. I live at 31st and West End. While I'm appreciative of all the hard work Councilman Jameson did and the Planning Commission, Jennifer Reagan in particular, did on this bill, to tweak it, to make it more neighborhood friendly, as you've heard by the speakers in front of me, I still have not been able to accept the one major flaw in this bill as far as I am concerned, and that is customers in our neighborhood. Increased traffic, safety of our families and children. I'm not understanding of why we would do de facto rezoning to the new urbanism desire of the Planning Commission and subvert the majority feeling in this city. That feeling being they want to live in a private, quiet, safe neighborhood, as opposed to a mixed-use neighborhood. I must tell you, I live in a mixed-use neighborhood by choice, but my friends, many do not want that in their neighborhood. So the city, with your support, has spent a great deal of money to sell this city as a city of neighborhoods, as a city of friendly people, as a progressive city. We don't need to be adopting this bill, which will immediately pit neighbor against neighbor, because all codes require a complaint. And when you have to start complaining against your next door neighbor, it creates a problem. Councilman Jameson says that we should have been reporting all of these people who are doing the things that they should not be doing. By virtue of the fact that we have not been doing so, and it has not been being enforced, why do we think a council bill will make people suddenly do this? Let's enforce what we have and take, as my predecessor said, baby steps toward what may be the right solution. I urge you to not listen to Councilman Jameson's argument about everybody's doing it, and instead it needs to fall on the same deaf ears as it did with my mother and probably your mother. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, members of the council. It's good to be here. I'm John Summers, and I'm a resident at 5000 Wyoming Avenue. According to the Planning Commission, we have 141,000, a little over 141,000 single-family dwellings. I didn't get a number for duplex, but 141,000 single-family dwellings. You know, I think this bill rises to the level of being a zone change. Even though it's a text change, we're really changing a basic core of our residential code from being residential, solely residential, to being a commercial office mixed use, as has been alluded to. And not a single property owner in Davidson County has been notified of this because a text change doesn't require it. I dare say there aren't but 1,000 or so, maybe 2,000 people in this whole county that realize even what we're discussing here tonight. You know, I'm not aware, except for COMZO, that this council has passed what I think is potentially a very broad, sweeping zone change without having notification of the public. And I think that's a legal issue as well here. You know, the sponsor of this ordinance that we've talked about has done a lot of research, and he's really worked hard on this. And he's pointed out the fact that there's 14,000 people, according to the census, say that they do some business from home. I do a business from home. I have a home business permit. But that only represents 10% if you assume everybody that says they have a business actually does have a business, and they're not just listing a business for a hobby for tax purposes. That means 90% out there want to have a residential neighborhood, in my opinion. I think you can make that argument just as easy as if there's a need for this when you have less than 10% that are engaged in businesses. But we already allow you to have a business out of your home. We're kind of confusing this issue. I mean, really, sight needs not be lost in the fact that we're talking about bringing a substantial number of people into the neighborhoods. I have a lot of concerns about the unintended consequences. I mean, we've seen that with other legislation like the historic home event, to where it was supposed to be for wedding receptions and we wound up having Playboy parties. I mean, Metro Legal just lost last month the final appeal. That's an issue that's drug out for 5, 6, 7 years and was very contentious within a neighborhood. I think it's going to change the nature of our neighborhoods because people are going to buy into neighborhoods for the business location, not just because they want to live there. And I think you are going to have competing businesses because the lawyer on the commercial street, he's going to have to compete with the guy in the neighborhood that's not paying the same taxes and rent. And I think it'll have an impact on our commercial real estate. What those consequences are, I don't think any of us know. I have suggested to Councilman Jameson that there is an alternative that I think works for everybody. And that is, I think we do this by overlay. We do it for bed and breakfasts. We can do use overlays. And that way you fit it to the nature of the business and the lot, because what fits on a 5,000 acre lot is not the same as what will fit on a 50 by 150 foot lot. I hope y'all defer this and set up a task force to study this and to come up with a solution that everybody can live with. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Jameson. I declare the public hearing closed.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I want to express my appreciation to all who spoke tonight, and in particular, members of a work group that I'd like to talk about in a moment. If I can share with you just sort of the procedural posture of this.
Do you have a motion?
I move for approval.
Have a motion and a second, Councilman.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. If I can discuss with you the procedural posture. We've had 11 community meetings on this bill. The most recent was in Councilman Dominy's district. I was not there. Jennifer Region attended. I understood there was acceptance or approval of those in attendance. Prior to that, Cherokee Park, because the bill was still undergoing amendments, the preferred expression of the neighborhood was general approval. We have 2 more community meetings coming up. I'd notified council members that if they wanted a community meeting, I would be glad to attend, and 2 council members took me up on that. The council will recall that there are repeat public hearings. This initially went before the Planning Commission April 28th. They approved it with recommendations. We took those recommendations and incorporated all of them into a revised version of the bill. It nevertheless came before this body and was approved, but because the amendments we were receiving from neighborhood meetings, community meetings, and the Planning Commission members resulted in a fairly significant changes, and also because, as you heard tonight, there was concern that members of the public weren't aware of the contents of this bill, we essentially decided to start all over with a new bill. So this is the second public hearing. The Metro Planning Commission had its second hearing. And we then formed a work group. I formed the work group. And to be honest, what I did was I went to those who had spoken in opposition at the Planning Commission and at the Metro Council previous hearing, thinking that I would get more input, more concerns expressed by those in opposition. If you're in support of it, and you don't want any changes, there wasn't much more you could add. So I just want to express appreciation to members of that work group, most of whom you heard from tonight: Patsy Bruce, Charlotte Cooper, Susan Floyd, Mina Johnson, Sandra Carlton, and John Summers, who gave up their evening hours to work on this bill with Jennifer Regan and myself. As a result of that work group and other community hearings, there are amendments forthcoming. Now, we hit a couple of snags. We've got a couple of community meetings coming up. Mr. Jones was unable to get to the amendments, Mr. Cooper, obviously, so we don't have the amendment tonight. And what my request is to my colleagues is if you will trust me to get those amendments to you well in advance of third hearing. And if you wish third hearing to be deferred to allow consideration of the amendments to see if we've captured at least the majority consensus, that's what I would ask you to do tonight. If you're in opposition to the bill, I'll understand. If the amendments don't capture your support, I will understand. But give me the chance tonight to get past second and then to discuss those amendments with you in sufficient advance of third. As a highlight, what some of those amendments I can anticipate are, based on the work group and the consensus that appeared to be reached, was that that we have a review period, annual, and at 3 years, a comprehensive review period, to see if this bill is in fact working or doing any of the detriments that are feared. A geographic limitation. Many zoning bills, as you know, have been limited either to the USD, to the UZO, and if that is any reassurance to those that we start this on a trial basis. There are a handful of other more technical amendments, but those are the two primary that I anticipate coming. Lastly, I would close with my last minute and 20 seconds just to remind you of the prevalence of this practice and also to submit to you that the argument is not, if everyone else is doing it, why shouldn't we? The argument is that we went to the zoning codes of every comparable city in the United States. There is not a single city in the United States that flatly prohibits clients and patrons on site. We are the only city in the United States with that flat prohibition. And what's more remarkable is that if you look at the history of Nashville, historically, we always allowed clients and patrons on site. What happened? In 1998, the zoning code was comprehensively overhauled. There was no individual attention to this issue. There was no community input on this issue. And for reasons that remain unclear, there are 15 banker's boxes at the Metro Planning Archives on this topic of the overhaul. And nobody understands why the patrons and clients prohibition was added. But it makes us unique in the country when we're not doing those things that other cities known for their neighborhoods, Savannah, Georgia, Charleston, South Carolina, allow this, and I think if you look to those cities, you'll see cities with vibrant neighborhoods. I ask for your patience and approval.
Councilman Todd.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. First, I'd like to thank Councilman Jamison for all the work he's put into this. Unfortunately, I think if you start with a bad bill, I don't care how many amendments and neighborhood meetings you have, I think at the end of the day, it's still going to be a bad bill. And unfortunately, I've come to the conclusion that this is just a bad bill. And I think we ought to end it here tonight. You know, I think it's interesting when Councilman Jamison sounded his first letter to all of us describing this, what he said was, there's really not a problem with the existing home occupancy law. I've got tons of small businesses in my neighborhood, and nobody's complaining about them. The important issue is, and I think this is the key distinction, is when you have a small business that fits within the home occupancy law, you're okay. But if you want to have more than that, if you actually want to have a little business, you really do it at the will of your neighbors. You know, I've got down the street, there's a tutor. Further down the street, there's a woman that teaches swim lessons. You know, all these things technically may be against the law, but they don't bother anybody. Nobody complains about it, and it works. If you start regulating this, you know, you take a bill that the existing home occupancy bill is 1 page long, and it works just because people get along with it. The bill Mike's drafted is 6 or 7 pages. I'll point out in a minute all the problems with it. But if you start drafting in an area that's this complicated, when you finish with all these amendments, it's probably going to be 20 or 30 pages. There still will be loopholes. So it's just, it's a real problem. You know, I thought it was interesting that nobody that spoke in favor of this bill actually has a home business. Ms. Carlton, who spoke against it, I thought made two great points. She said, it's really important. One size does not fit all here. All these neighborhoods across the city, we have 35 districts. They're all different. You can't cram this in and expect for it to work in all 35 districts. She also made another really good point. She said that this bill, which I think, and I thought it was important, we had two council people speak out against this. Councilman Summers, I forget what his point was, but it was good, but but again, it's too important to cram this in here at the end of the term. But, let me give you a couple quick examples of where I think there's some problems with this bill, some specifics. The way it reads right now is you can have two business permits in one house. So technically, I could have my law practice there. My wife could have her event planning business there. I could have an employee. So that's three people working in the house right now. Mr. Bruce pointed out, he's a lawyer, I'm a lawyer. It's not clear whether you could have violent people, criminal defendants, criminal clients come. You could have a broad general civil practice, and you could have some regular clients, but you could also have violent people come in the neighborhood. You could have, consulting in the neighborhood with, it's just, these are people who chose to live in a residential area, and we're bringing in people they didn't choose to live next to. So I think that's an issue. If I mentioned an example with a home business and a home occupation, I can have customers. The person with the home occupancy cannot have customers. How are you going to know who's a customer of the husband or the wife? It's just, it's too confusing. And it allows, if both the husband and the wife have a home business, you could have 5 or 6 cars in the driveway at one time with just at that one house. And what if every home on the street wanted to do this? Right now, like I said, I have a lot of existing businesses in my district, and they aren't bothering anybody. I have recording studios. I have, piano teachers. They aren't bothering anybody, but under this proposal, they're going to have to send out a notice to every adjacent property owner, and they aren't bothering them right now. But what if there's an issue with it, and all of a sudden, they can't operate their small business? That's not bothering anybody. So I just think this is a bad bill. We're rushing it in here, and I would be against it.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Gatto?
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I too want to commend Councilman Jameson for all the hard work he's done. He's just wrong. I'm sorry, but this is not a good bill. First of all, I'm not sure what the problem is. I brought this up at the Planning Commission 2 or 3 weeks ago, whenever it was before us the last time. Yeah, there's all these businesses that have not gone down and gotten a license from Metro to operate, but we don't know whether that's the only issue with them or not. And if the only issue is that they have not gotten their certificate to operate, then there's a much easier solution to this than there is just opening this thing up like we're talking about tonight. Neighborhood watch programs. They're going to be useless. If you've got neighborhood watch programs in your neighborhood, nobody's going to know what cars are okay to be there and which cars aren't. It's been brought up about the comparison of the neighborhoods. One size does not fit all. Councilman Jameson lives in a neighborhood that's very used to this. Historically, you go to East Nashville, and East Nashville has been historically, from the time it was established, with the corner grocery store and that kind of flavor. Where I live has more of a rural background, and the people that live there aren't used to that, and they don't want to live next door to a grocery store or down the street from whatever. So there's quite a bit of difference in the neighborhoods as you go from one part of the county to another. We already have zoning laws that take care of this. It's called mixed-use zoning. The people that buy a piece of property in a residential or residential single-family zoned location, they have a reason for doing that. They want to live in a neighborhood. If you want to live in a mixed-use area, you can buy a piece of property in a mixed-use zone. So opening this up, I think, is a disservice to those people that want to live in just a neighborhood, and they want to go 2 miles or 3 miles or however far it is to the nearest business. This is a mass rezoning, just like the one that was done in the 90s. Most of the people in this county don't know that that live in R and RS zone districts, that they're getting ready to have their property rezoned. because that's exactly what this is doing. There's the tax issue. How do you address the fact of this person's using his residential property for commercial business? Should he be taxed at a higher rate, he or she? It's unfair to other business owners that have to pay commercial rates for their location, for their business location. It's unfair to people that have invested their money in commercially zoned property, because all of a sudden you're taking part of their market away by saying these guys that have been renting from you are now going to be able to do this in their home. It creates an unlevel playing field. And last but not least, the call for service model to enforce codes stinks. That has nothing to do, comparing that to the way fire service is done is just totally off. I mean, that's just out in the ozone somewhere. There's absolutely no basis for that. And we had a codes director that sat right up here in this chamber during the budget hearings, and because the point was made about all the signs that his department is responsible for enforcing the rules on, because that's not being done, he pointed a finger at all these other departments and said they can do it too. So I'm sure that that's the way we're going to have this enforced, and there essentially is going to be no enforcement. I'm not going to put it quite as nice as Carter did. If you put lipstick on a pig, you still got a pig. Thank you.
Councilman Foster.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I'm often one given to colorful analogies, but I'll let that pass tonight. I did have a quick question for Mr. Cooper, just to make sure that I understand one thing. And you would think after 8 years I would know the answer to this, but it's a rules question. Is this bill amendable on third reading?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure about that. I don't support the bill. Ultimately, it boils down to the fact that we have very, very different neighborhoods from the central city out to the suburbs where I live. You're looking at such differences and such different expectations. Something that was focusing, solely on the center of the city, this might make sense. There are areas of town where this very, very well may make sense. But to paint with such a broad stroke is really to do a disservice to our constituents. And if we want to do something like this, it really deserves much broader discussion than it's gotten thus far. In spite of the fact I don't disagree that there's been substantial discussion as part of Inside Metro Baseball among a lot of people who care. But, ask yourselves, do you really think your run-of-the-mill constituent really understands the magnitude of this? So I would encourage you to vote against it. Thank you.
Councilman Tigert.
Thank you, and I do appreciate the time that Mike has spent on this bill. I did have the opportunity, trust me, if you've not heard Councilman Jameson and Councilman Summers spiritedly debate the bill, you've missed a real treat there, because they both have strong opinions. Some of the points that I wanted to raise of my concerns have already been breached tonight. Certainly the taxation issue. There is a possibility of dual taxation, commercial and residential. However, we have less than 5 properties, according to George Rooker right now, that are currently valued in such a way. So the burden that it would place on our tax assessor and whether he wants to tackle that, I think, warrants further discussion. Certainly, commercial businesses pay a different water and electric rate than residential businesses. So I would like to hear from NES and Metro Water and all the suburban water districts as to whether a portion of this commercially zoned bill would be charged those rates. We have a different rate for stormwater runoff. I would like to hear from Mr. Potter on whether that would be addressed. I want to know, my business has to meet ADA standards, and I would want to know if the home businesses would have to meet those same standards. We've already talked about parking. Some locations it works, some it doesn't. Certainly, one of the considerations is I noticed the Saturday prohibition. If a tax service, if my business needs to be open on Saturday, I'm open on Saturday. But if this is such a good thing, why is this a Monday through Friday? And we all know the code's problems on enforcement on Saturdays. The whole enforcement issue and our codes department's ability to go out there and count the number of visits. And finally, and I would just ask Mr. Cooper or Metro Legal now, ultimately, who trumps if there is a conflict? If my homeowner association prohibits home businesses, but Metro law allows it, which one trumps?
They're totally separate. If you have a homeowners association with restrictive covenants, that is part of your deed, then you are bound by those covenants just like everyone else. That's a private contractual matter between the property owners.
But it would become the homeowners association responsibility to then enforce that. I know we have an issue that certain neighborhoods have enforcement of problems when they prohibit on-street parking of the resident's vehicle. And I know Metro has said, if it's a city street, you can park your vehicle there. So we're once again placing a burden on our homeowner associations and putting them in a bad position. So this is a bill that needs a little work. I think there are some cases where the piano teachers and the swim teachers and some of those type of uses are acceptable. But I'm going to close with just this. I do the accounting for a beauty shop. And one of the operators who is now renting space from the operator of the shop who rents the overall space turns around and rents out stations to operators. And she pulled me aside and said, let me make sure I understand this. If this passes, I can go open up a one bay and I can take my clients up to 8 per day and I can just abandon what I have here now. And I said, that's my understanding. So I think there are some cases where commercial businesses would be hurt, and that's why I can't support this.
Councilman Coleman?
Move the previous question.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor of previous question, please say aye. Opposed, no. Previous question passes. We're now back on the original motion on 924. We had a motion and we're going to have a machine vote. They had a motion and a second for approval. Please use your machines. Madam Clerk?
Ayes 11, noes 21, 5 abstentions.
The motion for approval fails. Next is BL 2011-925, changes 4.44 acres from AR2A to IWD zoning for property located at 3941 and 3945 Stewart's Lane. Councilmember Matthews.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I would like to open up for public hearing.
Please raise your hand if you're in favor. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in favor wish to speak? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Matthews.
Do we have committee reports?
No.
No? Okay. I'd like to move approval.
Have a motion
Can I get a second?
and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Next is BL 2011-926, amends 36.25 acres of the Mount Laurel Reserve Specific Plan for property located at Hicks Road unnumbered east of Sawyer Brown Road to permit the development of 236 multifamily residential units where 129 multifamily residential units were previously approved. Councilmember Crafton.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Before I move to open the public hearing, I'm going to let my
council members know that we're going to move to disapprove this after the public hearing. I would normally try to do this beforehand, but after checking with the clerk, Marilyn Swing, because the public hearing was advertised, I'm obligated to have the public hearing instead of moving straight to moving to disapprove. So with that, I request to open the public hearing.
We'll need to see the slides.
This is BL 2011-926. It's a request to amend the Mount Laurel's Reserve SP on Hicks Road east of Sawyer Brown Road to permit 236 multifamily units where 129 units were previously approved. The Planning Commission recommended disapproval of the amendment. The property is currently zoned SP and is approved for 129 townhouse units. The policy in place is residential low-medium, which supports 2 to 4 units per acre. The property is characterized with steep slopes and problem soils. The top density of the policy is not recommended. The current plan is approximately 3.5 units per acre, and the proposed plan, which substitutes stacked flats for the approved townhouses, is approximately 6.5 units per acre, which exceeds the policy. In addition, the fire marshal has recommended disapproval as there is only one access and at least 2 are required for developments in excess of 200 units, and the access drive exceeds the 10% grade maximum of the fire code. This is a view of the property. The Planning Commission recommended disapproval of the amendment to the SP district.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Does anyone in support wish to speak?
Dell and Associates Engineering. I'm taking the opportunity to speak. I'm not really going to speak in support of this, quite honestly, so just bear with me. But I just want to walk you through a process. 1657 Stokely Lane, Old Hickory, Tennessee. Anyway, this project really had a very short fuse for our office. We submitted a plan barely in time to be heard by the Planning Commission, barely in time for the Planning Commission. We knew that there was going to be a community meeting. Normally, and I think we've done zonings in every district that's represented in this room. I think you know that, and I can't think of a single zoning in this council term that we haven't had here that wasn't supported by the community. So this is rare for me. So anyway, we knew that there was going to be a community meeting. We had a community meeting a couple of weeks ago, and as a result of this meeting, I told the community I would do everything I could do to make this plan acceptable to the community. So my entire weekend, I labored over this plan. I addressed the grade. I took care of the grade. I took care of the access. I reduced units. I moved buildings away from Hicks Road. I showed widening Hicks Road. I showed putting turn lanes into the site, out of the site. But at the bottom of at the end of the day, I was sitting at the fireworks display yesterday, and I was thinking, how am I going to present this to the council? Quite honestly, a couple of things kept going through my mind. One was abundance of caution, which a good person in this council has continually used for 4 years. And that kept going through my mind. But also, I looked at other zonings I've done throughout my years of working through the council. The most difficult zoning I've ever done was in Bellevue. And it was where the Publix is now. I had 12 community meetings. At the end of the day, I thought, you know, this is just too much. It really is too much. I think that there's actually a plan here that would work, but it's probably not this plan. Maybe it is this plan revised, but the community needs plenty of time. And I think I owe that to the community. They're good people. The people in Bellevue, a lot of them are my friends. Councilman Crafton has been very good to work with. He's very concerned about his community, and he wants something that's going to be right. So today I called Councilman Crafton, and I basically said, Eric, I just don't feel comfortable with this. I either want to withdraw this bill, or if you want to disapprove it, I understand. So I'm here in support, basically, of what the councilman wants to do. There's plenty of time to look at this property. It will develop at some point in time in the future. There are problems on Hicks Road. There are infrastructure deficiencies. There's properties adjacent to this that don't even have public water or sewer, which we're going to provide them. But I think that there just needs to be time. This is unfortunate because it's at the end of a council term. You're going to have another council member. That council member needs to be involved in this. And so I think that it serves this community better to put this on hold, come back at some point in time in the future, maybe the distant future, and come back with another plan. So I appreciate your time, and hopefully you'll understand the process I've been through. Thank you. Under the budget, the cost.
Anyone in opposition wishing to speak?
Hi, I'm Michael Rogers, 7713 Dan Kestner Drive, so I'm the kind of de facto community lead here. I'd like to thank Eric Crafton and Rodell. They've certainly got hold of some Broncos here in the Bellevue community on this one. So I certainly appreciate their patience, and certainly I know you guys enjoyed all our emails, so I appreciate email because it really makes easy talking to you guys. Obviously with any zoning requests, I think Roy hit it on the head that we just needed more time. This was really rushed, and it just wasn't a good fit from the community side. We had several things. Soils and slopes were issues. There were major slides in that area in May 2010. Traffic on Hicks is probably the biggest concern. It's a narrow two-lane country road. That's all there is. There's no sidewalks, no shoulders. There's ditches or high embankments on either side. It's a dangerous road. There's been deaths on it. There's been accidents. And certainly as part of this process, we certainly need to address reworking the Hicks Road process to enable this type of development. As you may have seen in the proposal, the proposed increase of 236 units would increase the traffic by 1,500 daily trips per day. Currently, according to Tennessee TDOT, the number of traffic today is 2,100 average. So you're almost seeing a 75% increase on traffic on Hicks based upon that. So there's some things we need to work on together, and certainly given the time, I think we can work those out. The other consideration was the schools. Public schools, these would be at capacity. They're at 115% or greater for the elementary school and the middle school. So the question the community had was, what are we going to do about the schools to address the schools? Are we going to build more schools, increase the size of the schools to support this? If so, are we going to increase their taxes to support that? Obviously, that's a favorite subject of everyone's. So as we work through this process, I think there's a few other things we'd like to work through. Obviously, property values is a major concern in our neighborhood. There's lots of empty housing units today. And so as we continue to significantly increase the units that are zoned in this neighborhood, the existing property owners who are trying to sell their units are certainly going to be challenged continually as we add more units in the Bellevue community. Again, as they mentioned earlier, the Bellevue community plan, it just doesn't fit into the plan. It's 4 units or less. This one is more than that. And the other question I think the community had was what kind of infrastructure requirements are going to be required? Is it water, gas, sewer? Are those going to be major improvements? We just went through a 4-inch gas pipeline upgrade on Sawyer Brown Road, and it was 2 months of single lane traffic on that road. As we continue to look at Bellevue Mall development, there's going to be additional traffic, and there's additional SPs that have been approved within a mile of this development, and we've got serious concerns about how that traffic is going to be addressed with those additional SPs. The Bellevue community thanks you for your time and commitment to Nashville. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Crafton.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'm going to make a motion to disapprove this zone change with a couple of comments, and I want to give one of these for the record. This is all the points that deal with this situation, concerns the community. I want to give one to the Planning Commission so they can put in their file also when this comes back up, so we don't have to start from scratch again. Again, I'm making the motion to disapprove this. I appreciate the opportunity of working with the Bellevue community. When this first started out, it was a pretty contentious zone change request. But one thing that we worked through during this process is getting people to understand, and this benefits all council members, folks watching, that just because we sign a bill doesn't necessarily mean that we approve of the zone change. But in fact, any property owner has the right to ask for a zone change and have their day before this council. And so as a council member, I, like you, sign my bills to make sure that I maintain control of my bills because I know my community best. And it's, quite frankly, it's my responsibility. It's not an at-large member's responsibility to do that. So that's what I did. In working with the community, these challenges arose, and the knee-jerk reaction, the easiest route would have been to just say, okay, let's reject this out of hand and move on. But we didn't do that, and I'm proud of the community for not doing that for this reason. I think that we were able to demonstrate fairness in working with the developer. working with the community, identifying the concerns, giving the developer and engineer a chance to go back and see if the possible considerations could even be incorporated into the plan. Is it economically possible? Could it be done via engineering? At the end of the day, we found out that it couldn't be done in a manner that the community could accept and the owner could accept. And that's okay, but what we demonstrated to other people looking to come to the Bellevue area is that, hey, if you come here with a project, we'll give you a fair hearing because we want smart, planned, well-done growth. The city needs that. Our community needs that, but we also showed that we won't roll over and just accept anything that comes along. So I think it was an excellent balance that the community did. I enjoyed the process. If I didn't, I wouldn't be a council member. You know, sometimes it gets a little contentious, but at the end of the day, when you finally get to the finish line, everybody's happy. They feel like they were heard, and the community was protected, and I'm proud to have worked with you know, my neighbors. I live, you know, a mile away from these folks. So these are my neighbors, and I'm glad we're able to work this through to everybody's satisfaction. I ask for your disapproval on this. Thank you.
The motion is for disapproval. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of disapproval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The motion to disapprove passes. Next is BL 2011-927, changes 1.31 acres from IWD to MUG district for properties located at 1004 and 1016 8th Avenue South. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I move to open the public hearing, please.
Please raise your hand if you're in favor. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing none on either side, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Moore.
I move for approval, please.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Next is BL 2011-928, amend 73.29 acres of the preliminary plan for the Bell Harbor Plan Unit Development Overlay located at 3549 Brick Church Pike and at Westchester Drive unnumbered, south of Bellshire Drive, zoned RM6 and R10 to permit 351 residential units where 371 were previously approved, and to eliminate 3 street connections. Councilman Hunt.
Madam President, please open the public hearing, please.
We'll see the slides first.
Thank you.
This is Council Bill 2011-928. This is a request to amend the Bell Arbor Planned Unit Development located at 3549 Brick Church Pike to permit 351 residential units where 371 were previously approved and to eliminate 3 street connections. The Planning Commission recommended disapproval of the request to eliminate 3 future connections, but approval of the elimination of the connection to Willow Creek Road only, and with the preservation of right-of-way for a future connection at this street. The other 2 connections would be reconsidered as that portion of the PUD is developed. This is the previously approved plan with the 3 connections. This is the requested plan with the 3 connections eliminated. The Planning Commission recommended approval of eliminating 1 of the connections at this time with the preservation of right-of-way so that a future connection is not precluded. This is an aerial view of the property. The Planning Commission recommended disapproval of the request to eliminate the 3 connections, but approval of the elimination of the connection to Willow Creek Road only, and with the preservation of the right-of-way for a future connection.
Could I have a show of hands of those who are in support? Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'm Roy Dell again, 1657 Stokely Lane, Old Hickory, Tennessee. And I only want to speak for just a second on this. This project, as proposed and as disapproved by planning, actually has community support. Councilman Hunt will go into much more detail than I on this, but basically this property is attempting to develop as a single-family subdivision, an upscaled subdivision. It's adjacent to a very blightful and dangerous subdivision that has numerous crimes every day. The builder in the subdivision that was building in there will no longer build there if those connections, the connections we're talking about, take place. What's going to occur there is this area will be landscaped There will be one connection to the subdivision as proposed, and then there still will be some future possibility, once the property is developed, that there may be connections in the future. But the plan as proposed, which is disapproved, is the plan that we support, and I think the council member supports too. Thank you.
Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Hunt.
Thank you, Madam President. I move for approval, but I have a brief explanation for this.
Have a motion and a second. Councilman Hunt.
Madam President, this is a piece of very unusual, and I'm going to ask them to put the map back up in a few minutes. We've had this to be developed on 3 different occasions. The first time it was done by Victory Church. They didn't have the money to go through with it. It was a plan that they had, but it went through. Then he sold it to another developer who didn't, his money went bust or went south. He couldn't do it. So we got another developer come in there to go ahead on and finish the project. Now, here's the problem I'm having with it. This area that they just showed you on the map is Westchester, one of the most high crime areas that we got in this district. I got 4 that I can pinpoint in the entire district. I told the planning commission, like I told some other developers, I don't want those connected because they've already broken into the model house before they got the last nail in it. Now, it makes no sense to continue to do this without getting this area cleaned up. I got about 4 or 5 developers in line that we got in mind to try to clean up the entire corridor on Brick Church Pike from Ewing Lane all the way down to Westchester, where the problem is. It makes no sense, and I think they're ignoring the fact that they went in there a year and a half ago, arrested 13 gang members that's in that area, and I do not want this connected to this district or no other district until we get it cleaned up. These cul-de-sacs that they are proposing to put in is adequate for turnarounds for fire equipment, so that's not a problem. Now, this is not to say that this won't be connected at some point in time in the future, but we got to get this thing cleaned up before I'm going to approve connecting it to anything. So that's what the developer's talking about, and they've already spent a lot of money in there, got 4 houses they had to just stop because they began to break in, and we got to stabilize this thing before we go forward. One of the ways of getting it stabilized is not put the connections in there until sometime in the future till we get it cleaned up. I'm not saying we're not going to eventually connect it. I'm just saying I don't want to connect it now with all the crime that's going in there. I gave them, when I spoke to the planning commission, I gave them the number of times the police have been over there, the shootings, the break-ins, and that got ignored. So I'm asking tonight for the plan that we have for this community is to eliminate those connections. We're going to get this area cleaned up, and I ask for approval based on the one connection that's been presented tonight. Thank you very much.
Councilman Gatto.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I remember when this came through over at planning, and I think I was the one in the 8-1 vote to disapprove. Councilman Hunt is trying to protect his community, and Councilman, I agree with you, so I'm going to support the councilman. I urge everybody in here to do that. Thank you.
All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Next is BL 2011-929, changes 2.06 acres from IR to MUGA district for property located at 615 Spruce Street and 21st Avenue North unnumbered, north of Charlotte Pike. Councilmember Langster.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Move to open the public hearing, please.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Langster.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. With that, I move for approval, please.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-930 changes 48.57 acres from R20, RM9, and IWD to SP zoning for properties located at 2114 Smith Springs Road, 1806 Reynolds Road, 1812 Reynolds Road, and at Reynolds Road unnumbered north of Smith Springs Road to prevent 950,000 square feet of industrial office, warehouse, and distribution, up to 78 multifamily residential units and open space uses. Councilmember Wilhoit.
Yes, thank you, Vice Mayor. I open up the public hearing, please.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Those in support wishing to speak, please line up at the lectern.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor, members of the council. My name is Michael Garrigan. I'm an engineer with Dell & Associates, 516 Heather Place. We're the consulting firm representing the property owners. This is essentially a down zone. What it is the property zoned for industrial, it's zoned for multifamily, and it's zoned for single family, but it's all hodgepodge together. What this specific plan will do, it organizes it. It creates a master plan. There's no increase in industrial uses. There is a decrease in residential uses, and there is an increase in open spaces and parkland. So a lot of positive things can come out of this. We've had a community meeting. We've answered the questions today. Some specific items. There's a small family cemetery that needs to be cleaned up. We need to show plans how it can have permanent ingress, egress, public access, and some, of course, traffic concerns, which we've addressed to date with turn lanes, traffic studies. But just with any zoning, there's still more questions. We're going to have another meeting next week. And then moving forward, Council Lady Woolhoit's told us that obviously anything that comes up, we're going to address it. We're going to get it an amendment prior to third, and we're more than happy to do so. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Anyone in opposition wishing to speak, please come to the lectern and line up, please.
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the council, I'm Arnett H. Bodenhammer, 2900 Starboard Drive. I've lived at that address for 33 years. 17 years ago, either give or take a year, I was on the Planning Commission when we disapproved a plan to develop that road and highway down there. Since they closed down Couchville Pike that used to run through the airport, the egress out there is not suitable for doing what they are asking to do. I call Reynolds Road a farm to market road. The service is probably an F. The level of service for Reynolds Road is probably an F, and I would say the level of service for Smith Springs Road is probably a D. To increase anything out there without doing something to those roads, I think would just be suicidal. So I asked you to take a good hard look at this and disapprove it, because the traffic on Smith Springs Road as well as on Reynolds Road is just not conducive to any development that's being considered. So I ask you to disapprove it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Richard Curran. I live at 2211 Smith Springs Road, approximately 600 feet from the proposed change. Tonight, I'm representing Betty Inzer Thomas, who is our Una Neighborhood and Historic Preservation Association president. She is out of town tonight. And we had a couple of concerns. We've addressed some of them, and some of them have been addressed by Ms. Wilhoit. Several weeks ago, we had a neighborhood meeting to which Mr. Was referred to earlier. And tonight, it's Ms. Thomas' desire for the record to reflect there still remains several unresolved issues. One is traffic, as Mr. Bodenhammer alluded to. The other is a 3-acre park proposed that most folks don't seem to think that Metro should be paying for, the upkeep thereof. Schools, Una Elementary School currently, well, is actually enlarged about 2 years ago. It now has 12 portables. They've just added about 6. And also the quality of construction of the housing units need to be in conformity with those of the community. Ms. Wilhite, Council Lady Wilhite, has indicated to Ms. Thomas that we're going to have a neighborhood community meeting, I believe, next week. And after this meeting, we would like to have a copy of the amended proposal prior in time so that we can consider it as a community once again prior to the third and final reading of this issue. I guess to quote Mr. Dale's earlier comment, the community needs just a little bit more time. We're not really opposed to the man doing anything on his property. We appreciate Ms. Wilhite's efforts in this respect, and we want to move forward. But we want to do it in an orderly fashion, and we want to make sure that the concerns that we have as a community are fully addressed, and then that we know exactly what changes are going to be included in the final version of the bill. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Vicki Tatarin, and I'm a resident at 2510 Sleepy Hollow Drive, and that's adjacent to this area, and the traffic there impacts my area quite a bit. What we are concerned about, and again, I would like to reiterate what Richard just said, we are not against this. We just want to make sure that we are fully understood and everything is in line before it moves forward, is the egress from the industrial park onto Reynolds Road. Reynolds Road is not suitable. I have been down it twice myself lately. I hit a trash can once, and I almost hit a tree the second time. There are curves on that road. I drive a lead sled, so it's not really, it's not a semi, but it's not a good car for that sort of road. And I can't see taking trucks in and out every day. And Smith Springs, even though it's a little wider, has a lot of traffic on it, and it comes around a dangerous curve right where this development will be. So we want to make sure that those traffic issues, the ingress, egress from this area is fully studied before moving forward. And also, one of the issues that Ms. Thomas wanted me to make sure that I brought to your attention was the legality of having industrial traffic going through a residential neighborhood, because that's what happens with this plan. And we're not sure that that's a good idea to have trucks going through a residential area of 78 housing units. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gene Dixon. I also live at 2510 Sleepy Hollow Drive in Nashville, Tennessee. I'd like to echo all the concerns that I've heard and recommendations that I've heard thus far, and I think they're all very good. I believe in the economic development, but one of the biggest concerns that I've seen is that the sewer lines in the area, if they're even there at all, are not suitable for industrial development. I'd like to see that included before this bill goes any further towards approval or disapproval. And the cost, we're not certain that the Metro should share that cost. I think that should also be the developer's cost. And I'd like to see that included as well. Other than that, I don't have any further comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Karen Y. Johnson. I live at 2928 Moss Spring Drive, Antioch, Tennessee 37013. Again, I echo everything that has been shared, but one of the things that we as the community had expressed at the community meeting at Una School that Council Lady Wilhoit held was that we wanted to have included additional turn lane options and the widening of the lane widths and the addition of the shoulders of the curb and gutter. We were promised also that a traffic impact study would be submitted and included as part of this plan, and we as a community would like to be able to have access to that. Additionally, we were told that there would be no access to Reynolds Road because of the hazards that that road poses. It's very narrow, limited lighting, very dangerous curves. We prefer not to have access to Reynolds Road, but there is a prior ordinance that was placed in by Tony Derryberry that allowed that. So I don't know exactly what our rights would be in terms of limiting access to that. We also wanted to ensure that there were masonry products only because we wanted to have a better residential impact. So we don't want any vinyl on the multifamily. We prefer the brick. And then there were concerns around the cemetery and making sure that that was cleaned of debris and open to the public and supplied with a small parking area. So as long as these conditions are met, I think that many of us in the community would be okay with the project moving forward, but we look forward to the additional community meeting being held and the concerns being addressed and included in the ordinance that hopefully will be approved.
Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Wilhoit.
Yes, thank you, Vice Mayor. Just want to assure the community that we will be having our community meeting next week, and they will be notified in reference to that meeting. In addition, all of these matters that were brought forward tonight to you, council members, and to the viewing audience, they were duly listed from that night. Nothing tonight is of new development other than the information regarding the sewer. I also like to remind the District 29 residents that a lot of these concerns are concerns that would be addressed at the time that the plan is submitted to the Planning Commission. So these are things that we want to make sure is noted as other criteria, but there is something that will be held accountable at the Planning Commission to ensure that they are done. Definitely in reference to the traffic onto Smith Springs Road. On May 16th, after the meeting, I went out to look at Reynolds Road again, and there had not been any more improvement to Reynolds Road other than the narrow street, and the more compromising street has always been. It was already concluded that there would not be exit off onto Reynolds Road, and that would be a part of the amendment that is being pursued on third reading. With that being said, listening to the community, I ask for your approval on second reading. We'll move forward to our community meeting next week, and we look forward to bringing these concerns of the community brought back to you through an amendment, and I ask you for approval. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Next is BL 2011-931, changes 10 acres from R40 to AR2A district for property located at 7791 Charlotte Pike. Councilmember Crafton.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Request to open the public hearing.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak? Thank you. I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Crafton.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'm going to ask an approval of this on second reading.
Have a motion and a second.
Thank you. This is pretty simple. This is property adjacent to another downzoning that we did. I can't exactly remember when this term, maybe 6 months to a year ago. This is just a contiguous piece trying to do the same thing recommended by the Planning Commission, so I ask for the council's approval. Thank you.
All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Next is BL 2011-932, changes 5.61 acres from AR2A to SP zoning for property located at 4608 Ashland City Highway to permit building, contractor, supply, and agricultural activity. Councilmember Matthews.
Yes, Madam Vice Mayor, I move for indefinite deferral.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor of indefinite deferral, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Next is BL 2011-933, changes 1.26 acres from RS40 to SP zoning for property located at 7836 Old Harding Pike to permit a daycare center. Councilmember Mitchell.
Yeah, I move to open the public hearing.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Mitchell.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a few things. We've had a couple of move for approval.
Have a motion and a second. Councilman Mitchell.
Yeah, we've had several public community meetings regarding this. I actually went door to door over the weekend, just talking with the neighbors, making sure. The developer's been wonderful working with all the neighbors, and we've got it down to now just the types of fencing that the neighbors would like to see, and even some of the trees that the developer has agreed not to touch for the neighbors. So with that, I'm going to just let the neighbors know, coming up on third reading, I'm going to incorporate an amendment to go with this to address some of their concerns, to make sure it's actually in the legislation what the developer has agreed to, and with that, I ask for your approval.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-934 changes 1.04 acres from R10 to CL District for property located at Murfreesboro Pike unnumbered south of Volte Boulevard. Councilman Stein.
Public hearing, please.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition. Is there a hand in opposition? Was there a hand in opposition? No. No. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak? I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Stein.
I move approval with a very brief comment.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Councilmember.
For those surprised to see me handling a zoning issue, let me explain that this is Councilman Birch's bill, and I did sign it for him so that it would be before us, and he will certainly be handling this on third reading, but I do renew the motion to approve on second reading.
Councilman Tiger.
I just wanted to commend my colleague on his initiation to zoning and the countless hours he spent on this bill.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-935 changes 0.36 acres from R10 to OR20 district for property located at 2631 Smith Springs Road. Councilmember Wilhoit. Councilman Crafton.
Would it be appropriate to recommend we move this to the end of the agenda?
We can move it to the end of the public hearing.
End of the public hearing,
We'll come back to that. Okay. Next is BL 2011-936, amends 40 acres of the preliminary plan of the Cumberland Yacht Harbor Plan Unit Development located at 2140 Lebanon Pike and 252 Donaldson Hills Drive, classified MUG, to permit the development of 126 dwelling units and commercial space. Councilman Claiborne.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Open the public hearing, please.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Would anyone in support wish to speak? Please come to the lectern.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor, members of the council. My name is Michael Garrigan. I live at 115 Barton Lane, which is in the Pennington Bend area of Donaldson. I'm also an engineer with Dell & Associates. We're representing the owner of this property. This isn't a zone change, but it's an amendment to the current PUD. Without getting too specific, this plan does downgrade the densities and the intensities of the current PUD. It reduces the residential density by about 30%, the commercial density by about 65%. But the big thing that it does is it replaces the central amenity of the PUD, which currently is a 225 boat marina with an environmentally friendly public park, what we call an eco park. We met very early on with the community, with Councilman Claiborne. One, because when our client bought the property, he knew he didn't want to build mid-rise condominium buildings, and he knew he didn't want to build a marina, which is what the current plan governs. And two, we knew a bit of the history that this property had had, and we knew the concerns the community would have, and we wanted to hear those on the front end. We wanted to get their input. Since that time, we've worked together. We've probably had 4 meetings with the community, some with block captains, some when 500 flyers were sent out. We've replaced the mid-rise 6-story buildings with a small cottage development. We've downsized that commercial from 50,000 square feet down to 18,000 square feet, created more of a neighborhood-friendly, walkable, mom and pop type community aspect versus a large-scale, multi-car parked commercial development. But again, the big thing is what we're calling the eco park. The eco park's 25 acres. It consists of man-made wetlands. It consists of natural wetlands, over a mile of greenway trails and walking trailheads, nature viewing stations, arbors and gazebos, all paid by the private developer, but completely open to the public. It's a new thing to Davidson County, and it's something that our company, as well as my boss Roy, are really excited about and really trying to push. Saw somebody laugh. But you know, real quick, my time's running out. I've got a couple little kids. I watch a lot of Disney Channel. This weekend, I saw that they awarded the Disney Planet Challenge to a group of 3rd graders out of Louisiana that called themselves the Wetland Warriors. This is something that's the immeasurable part of these eco parks, which is the community education aspect, something everybody can get into, everybody can learn about through signage, through public planning days. There's so many benefits this could provide. With that, my time's running out, so I hope that everybody supports this.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Members of Metro Council, I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you tonight. My name is Jeff Syracuse. I'm a resident homeowner in the Donaldson Hills neighborhood at 222 Graham Drive. I'm in favor of this proposed Villages of Donaldson Hills development. Compared to the last proposed use of this property, this development is environmentally sensitive to the land by leaving 90% of the tree line intact, and 30 of the 40 acres would be this eco park with walking trails, arbors, and other amenities. This will be an attraction not just for Donaldson, but all of Nashville, especially if it connects with future parts of Metro Greenway. I've studied this low-impact development thoroughly and listened carefully at all the meetings and the presentations given by Mr. Dale & Associates. It appears to be a progressive and responsible engineering project. I have high hopes the type of residential and retail being proposed attracts the growth Donaldson sorely needs. This also affords Donaldson Hills Drive with needed updates to the intersection with dedicated left and right turning lanes and a possible signal pending the traffic study. So I'm in favor of it. Thank you.
Anyone in opposition wishing to speak, please line up at the lectern.
Hello, I'm David Allen of Donaldson. I live on 2140 Guarantee Drive. I'd like to speak in opposition to Bill number BL 2001-936 because the zoning change will lead to construction in a flood zone. The area in question needs to remain in its current state, which is the most environmentally sensitive, which is a floodplain wetland. Now, I'm not going to get into the long history of the Battle of the Marina, which was originally proposed. On face value, the proposed change appears to be a downgraded development. However, there is no marina. As it stands, there's supposed to be a marina. To keep the area from ever having housing there, the developer has to put in a marina. Now, this may be a technicality, but it was also a part of the spirit of the Metro Council's decision 3-4 years, maybe about 7 years ago, to, they said, all right, we'll change the land to a marina. In part, I believe large numbers of the community would have been more opposed if there was never a marina planned. The marina, I think, caused a lot of people to feel that it'd be upscale, well-maintained, and so forth. We've been told at community meetings that they don't have to go before the zoning board, it's going to be approved as is, and that if we don't take this, there could be something worse. That's not correct. I've spoken with lawyers, I've spoken with the planning commission, and they basically say the land, if it's no marina, cannot be changed. There's several reasons why I think it's a bad idea to develop here. Number one, safety. This area floods, and as others will talk, floods regularly, not just in the 2010 2010 flood. We've got to worry about the people who are going to buy houses there, Metro having to come in, rescue them pretty regularly. Number two, this is built right on one of the main tributaries of the Cumberland River, could impact the drinking water. Number three, there's animals there, they're going to be moved. In the end, while some of the land is being preserved, a large part of it is being paved over. Four, this area is only 10 feet above the Mill Creek. Mill Creek floods frequently. They're going to have to increase the amount of land it's built upon. The flood waters will have to go elsewhere. Other parts of town could be impacted by the building of this program. Also, let's face it, housing sales are weak around the city. By adding in a couple hundred houses, there's housing vacancies in the Donaldson Hills, there's housing vacancies around the town. Right now, I don't think this is generally, as a business standpoint, is a great idea. Please examine this proposed change. I believe if this happens, while very minor on paper, it will lead to 1, continued depression of home prices, 2, a safety burden, 3, serious environmental hazards, and 4, more litigation. The marina was fought by people who filed a lawsuit, an endangered species. This could do the same and it clog up the courts. I think you should, once again, disapprove this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Brian Kennard, and I live at 2132 June Drive. I'm one of the longest standing residents in Donaldson Hills. I've lived there since I was 3 years old. I bought the house I grew up in from my mom and dad. I liked it so much. I could have moved anywhere in the world after college, done anything I wanted to. I wanted to live in Donaldson, in Nashville. And I wanted the space down the hill from me to stay a nice, quiet floodplain. Is that too much to ask anyone? My buddy Dave, who just spoke, when he'd come over to my house in high school, liked the neighborhood so much, when him and his wife got married and had a child, they moved to the house behind, or the street behind me, because they liked the neighborhood so much. I'm not going to go through the impacts. We know what they are. It's traffic. In Eco Park, the gentleman in the yellow shirt earlier that spoke, if he wants to live down the hill from that, he can certainly buy a house on June. I don't want the increased traffic. I don't want the increased risk. Have we heard about the engineering? As my buddy was saying, Cumberland River to the north, Mill Creek to the west. Mill Creek dumps into the Cumberland there. It doesn't take a rocket science to figure out this is a bad idea. Homes will be damaged. Emergency services money will be spent. Within 3 to 5 years, it happens every 3 to 5 years, that turns into Lake Donaldson Hills. And anybody that's lived around the area, driven down Lebanon Road, knows exactly what I'm talking about. That's going to impact my insurance rates as a homeowner. It's going to impact the lives of the people that you're going to approve this change in zoning to move into this area. Might be doomsaying, but remember, you will be giving the green light to people to move into a potentially dangerous area. Have you done the studies on this? Personally, have you seen what the impact is going to be on emergency services? As councilmen, and women. I ask you that. Have you paid enough attention to this to make an informed decision? I don't know. I would hope that you would, being my elected representatives. But if you haven't, consider what I'm saying. Get the information and make an informed decision. So I'd ask that you would disapprove until you can answer in your heart, yeah, I can answer all this man's questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Claiborne.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I move for approval with a brief explanation.
We have a motion and a second. Councilman?
As you've heard said here, this is actually a PUD revision. There are some 40 acres involved in this, and it was the former marina project. It borders on Mill Creek, and the Cumberland River is to the north. This is actually, in essence, a down zoning, even though it's a PUD change, because, as again you heard, it's going from what is proposed 181 dwelling units to 126 cottage-sized dwelling units. It's going from 50,000 square feet commercial area down to no more than 18,000 square feet. These 126 cottage homes will be built above the floodplain. There will be cut and fill in order to accomplish some of the eco park that is going to be built here. The cut will be moved up close to Lebanon Road, and the cottage development will actually be right at the level of Lebanon Road, which does not flood. We have had 4 community meetings. I've had numbers of conversations over the phone with individuals who were not able to attend the meetings either because of age or because of work. And as you've heard, there's a small number of people in the community that are not in favor of this. It's hard to get 100% of people to agree on anything. But in listening to the conversations in the meetings that have taken place, and in talking to people in the neighborhood, it's my firm conviction that the majority of the neighborhood are in favor of this. And so I renew my movement to approve.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Next is BL 2011-937, amends .93 acres, the South View on Second Specific Plan, and by changing from R6 to SP for properties located at 1064, 1066, 1068, 1070, and 1072 A, B, and C, 1074 A, B, and C, and 1078 2nd Avenue South, and at 112 Mildred Chute Avenue to add .8 acres to the specific plan district to permit the development of up to 19 dwellings. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I move to open the public hearing, please.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak? I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Moore.
I move for approval, please.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-948 changes 3.06 acres from IR to MUI district for property located at 28th Avenue North unnumbered. Councilmember Langster.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I ask you to open the public hearing, please.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you. Raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Langster.
I move for approval with a comment.
Have a motion and a second. Councilmember.
Thank you. I appreciate Reverend Theodore Bryson of Mount Nebo Baptist Church waiting to this late hour to be in support of this. He called a meeting of the faith community, the different pastors surrounding this property, and they had a meeting with the developers, and they got all their questions answered, and it was a smooth process, and I very proudly renew my motion on second reading. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. BL 2011-949 amends 1.77 acres from the Barbecuity Commercial Plan Unit Development Overlay located at 5207 Nolensville Pike, classified CS, to permit a 560 square foot dining room addition to the existing restaurant. Councilman Foster.
Please open the public hearing.
Please raise your hand if you're in support. Please raise your hand if you're in opposition. Seeing no one in opposition, does anyone in support wish to speak? Please come to the lectern.
Yeah, my name is Ronnie McFarland. I live at 5617 Green Apple Lane, and I'm the owner of Barbecuity on Nolensville Road. And I just want to take this time to thank Councilman Foster and Councilman Hodge for their support, and also the Planning Commission is quite a process, and they did a very, very thorough and professional job, and I just want to commend them for that. Thank you.
Thank you. I declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Foster.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Move approval with a brief explanation.
Have a motion and a second. Councilman Foster.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I just wanted to let my fellow council members know that I did announce and send out notices for and hold a public hearing on this change at Barbecuity, and besides the proponent and his architect and Councilman Hodge, nobody showed up, which suggested to me that the community didn't have a problem with this. Barbecuity is a really good neighbor in our community, a fine product, and it'll be nice that there'll be more sit-down room inside the restaurant. So I hope you'd support me. Thank you.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. We're now going back to BL 2011-935. Changes .36 acres from R10 to OR 20 district for property located at 2631 Smith Springs Road. Councilmember Wilhoit.
Yes, Vice Mayor, I'd like to move to suspend the rules for the purpose of offering a substitute, deferring the bill as substitute for 2 meetings, and holding a public hearing on the substitute bill at the August 2nd, 2011 council meeting.
Is there any objection to a suspension of the rules? Seeing none, go right ahead.
All right, thank you. It is my motion to defer the meeting to the August 2nd council meeting for the purpose of considering the substitute bill on public hearing and second reading, and I move for approval.
Don't you need to offer the substitute tonight?
I'd like to adopt, well, the substitute offered up, has it been provided? I'd like to move offer up the substitute. Yes, the substitute bill that's on each council member's desk.
We have a motion and a second on the substitute.
I ask you for your approval.
All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Substitute passes.
Thank you, and I move the bill as substituted.
You deferred the bill.
To defer for to the August 2nd council meeting for public hearing.
So you're deferring to the August 2nd meeting and to have a public hearing?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Councilman Foster.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Just a quick question. I just want to make sure, will the deferral to that period of time provide for adequate notice?
Yes, sir.
It would.
The reason it's being deferred 2 meetings is to allow the 21 days public notice.
Absolutely.
All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. We're now at the consent agenda. Councilman Adkins.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Just for everybody's, all of the consent agenda resolutions were approved. 10-4, none against, except 1734, 1735, and 1736 were deferred by rule. And that's the committee report.
Okay, we have a motion for approval of all but 1734, 1735, and 1736. And a second. We're dealing with these right now. We'll come to the first ones. All in favor of those on the consent agenda, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Okay, the others were deferred by rule. Councilmember Will Hoyt.
I'd like to ask for suspension of the rules so I can bring forward 1734 and 1735, Vice Mayor.
Is there any objection to a suspension of the rules? Seeing none, Councilmember Will Hoyt has asked for approval of BRS 2011-734 and 735. Is there a second? All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Councilman Holland.
Mayor, I move to suspend the rules for the purpose of considering 2011-1736.
Is there any objection to a suspension of the rules? We have two objections.
Vice Mayor, if you could, and instruct the clerk to record those names of two members of this council.
Councilman.
1 month before.
I'm sorry. Next is RS 2011-1737, approves the election of certain notaries public of Davidson County. Councilman Adkins.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. 1737,
Councilman Adkins.
I move approval of 1737. It's our normal election of notaries.
Have a motion and a second. Committee report, Councilman, from your committee.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot the committee report, but the committee approved 10-4, none against.
And we have a motion and a second. Councilman Claiborne, do you wish to be recognized on this one?
No, on the previous, I'd just like to respond to comments that were directed toward me.
All in favor, please say aye of 1737. There was an objection to a suspension of the rules, so we are not going to consider or discuss 1736. We're now at bills on first read, introduction and first reading. Is there a motion for their approval? Second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Is there a motion to adjourn?